All right, guys, a couple of more things on these cameras and what you want to utilize. All right, a couple of more things on these cameras that are pretty useful. So make sure that you are utilizing right back here, and it might be slightly different on, there are two different types of NX cams. There's NX cam, and then I believe NX cam R. There's some slightly different things in here, just the way, like where the power switch is and that sort of thing. They go over that in the JetLab tutorial, so make sure to watch that if you haven't already. But you're going to want to utilize this port right here, which is the headphone port, right in the back of the camera. If you are doing an off-camera interview, your earbuds are in the entire time. That way you can monitor the audio. Even if you test it at first and it sounds pretty good, you know, things can happen. People can, when I was a Cronkite sports reporter, I was moving from one set to the other, and it was a wired mic. I stepped on my mic and it ripped off my shirt, and I didn't quite know it, and I was not mic'd up anymore. So that can certainly happen. Another example, and one that I am clearly over, is Herm Edwards got hired, opening a press conference, and my camera person was not wearing earbuds. We had tested before. We ended up moving a location just a couple of feet away, but apparently the mic pulled a little bit, and something got loose in the XLR cord, and I had no audio for an interview with Herm Edwards, a one-on-one, as he was getting introduced. And it was one of the few times I've walked away from an interview being like, yeah, I nailed that. No audio, just a sucky feeling. And that could have been relieved really easily, or you know, caught pretty easily if that camera person was wearing earbuds. So make sure that happens. Things can happen. Batteries can die midway through an interview, that sort of thing, and you'll be able to catch it right away. But if you're not wearing earbuds, you're not going to catch it, and then you wasted your time and your interviewee's time. So make sure that you have your earbuds in whenever you're shooting, especially off-camera interviews. But even wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if you just had them handy for certain nat pops and that sort of thing, just to make sure everything sounds good as well. So that's part of, you know, obviously you're bringing out a lot of equipment when you go out on a shoot, but also make sure that you are utilizing your headphones. A couple of other things. You're going to utilize the viewfinder a lot to, you know, just watch your footage live as you're recording. But one other thing that can be helpful, especially if there's a glare, it's kind of tough to see, is if you close it, you can go through the eye hole, and it will kind of just help you with coloration and things like that, and just make sure your footage isn't too hot or anything like that. Now, if you feel like everything's focused up on here correctly, but it's getting really blurry when you go through the eye hole, there's a little slider right here, and you can adjust it to make sure. Sometimes it just under different settings, you want to make sure that you have that flexibility. So if for whatever reason, you can't figure out why it's so blurry when you look through the eye hole, but when you look through the viewfinder, everything looks good, it's probably that this slider is slightly off. So just slide it, adjust it, and you can make sure. The other thing, headphone-wise, that's back here, that's pretty useful. Right here, it says headphone monitor. You have channel 1 on one side, channel 2, and then stereo mix. So channel 1, in most cases, at least how we'll do it for the basics at least, is that's what your mic is going to be. So if you're doing a interview and you have someone mic'd up, that'll more than likely be where you plug into. Channel 2, typically, we have set to the internal mic. Obviously, different stories can call for different setups, but for the most part, channel 2 will be your internal mic. So if it's a really loud, you know, let's say you're Desert Financial Arena, ASU just beat Kansas, you're trying to do a quick interview on the court with Remy Martin, Doug Tammarell approved it and everything, and the internal mic is so loud that you can't hear if your audio is good on that mic, you can pop this over, and then what feeds into your headphones will just be channel 1. So I have it set to channel 1 right now. By that same token, you can flip it to channel 2 if you need, if you want to only get internal mic, or you have a second mic plugged in for this one and you want to test and make sure that they sound good. If most of the time, and I would recommend for the most part to have it flipped right in the middle, which is stereo mix, which will get channel 1 and channel 2 at the same time. Now in post, of course, we can flip certain video files just to channel 1 or channel 2 if we need to, and that sort of thing. But if you are kind of in that bind and you can't really tell, like, I'm going deaf in one ear from this internal mic, I need to make sure that my actual mic for my interview sounds good. That way you can isolate it, and it makes life a lot easier. Plugging in the mics. So that will go right here. You'll read input 1, input 2. Again, these are some of the settings. There are a couple notches right here, and then a couple other audio notches right here. In the JetLab tutorial, they go over that, and they go over what it should be in most cases. So definitely read up and watch up on that if needed. So you have input 1 here. There's also a slot where you can put a boom mic if you need to. The key with this one, obviously if you have a handheld mic with the remote setups where it will be a boom mic, it will have its own cords you can plug into. The thing, and we aren't necessarily using them this semester, but in the future for lav mics, I'm wearing one right now, you don't plug the lav mic directly into the camera. You want an XLR between the mic and the camera. And it's really easy for prongs to get bent and that sort of thing, and plugging it directly into an XLR usually will minimize that by quite a bit. So you want to have an XLR plugged into the lav mic, and then the lav mic goes here. It also gives you some more flexibility and some more space. I have, I think, a 12-foot XLR plugged in right now, and then I have quite a bit of wire here. This isn't a wireless lav mic. I'm going old school here, but for a wired mic, you can have probably like 25 feet worth of room to work with. So that's the other thing. You don't have a ton of, as much line if you plug a lav mic directly into the camera as well. And that gets into another thing. You will get XLRs when you check things out with microphones. Make sure that you have a long enough one. If you're going to a press conference, you want to make sure that you probably have at least 20 feet, maybe if not more. So you can request a long XLR, or if they don't have them, maybe 2 shorts, that sort of thing. You always want to have too much line and not enough line. You don't want to be the person that gets to the press conference late, has to be way away from the mult box, and then you're setting up a tripwire behind the rest of your camera people. So you want to have that flexibility where if you do have to be far away from wherever you're plugging into your source, you have that where it can be on the ground, it's not going to trip anybody, and it could potentially take out your camera. So yeah, make sure to plug, once again, with the lav mics, just make sure you have an XLR between the two of those. Might be a simple thought here, but if you do need to clean the lens, probably have a cloth with you or something like that. I know more and more of you guys will have probably screen cleaners and that sort of thing with your laptops or whatever devices you have. But smudges can pretty easily get on there. If you're doing spring training with the Sports Bureau over the next couple of years, you're going to be around a lot of dirt. So you'll see specks kind of pop up. Make sure you're cleaning your lens consistently, and I'm sure the JetLab will do that when they get it back. But just also be aware of that, because that does show up on your footage, especially if the sunlight is going in. You'll see specks all over pretty easily, and you don't want people noticing the specks. You want people noticing the gorgeous footage that you're shooting. And then finally, one other thing, the JetLab touches on this, but just wanted to go over this again. The ND filter, which is right here. So those are essentially sunglasses for your camera. It will take in light a very certain way. If you're outdoors, it'll probably need sunglasses. So you can crank that up to 2 or 3 on the ND filter, and that will just kind of bring the light down just enough so you can really capture that color and it's not blown out. Now, if it's super, also, if you have that on and you go inside to a regularly lit room like this one, it will be really, really dark. So be cognizant of where you're at on the ND filters. A lot of time the camera will even scream at you sometimes and like be blinking, like if you go outside, it's like ND3, ND3, ND3. Sometimes the camera's wrong, so make sure it looks good. And another thing is, if you're doing like a high school football game, especially traditionally early on in the season where it's around late August, early September, the sun is setting as the game is going. So you'll need to be a little bit darker as the sun is setting, and then once it gets to dark and the lights are kicking on, you'll need to adjust your white balance, you'll need to adjust your iris, a lot of different things like that. So just be aware of that. If you set something at the beginning of a shoot or a beginning of a game, that doesn't necessarily mean those are going to be the settings for the night. You're going to be adjusting a lot. You're going to be adjusting your focus. I would say, for me, I adjust it almost every single play. You'll be adjusting your white balance as the sun is going down. You're going to be adjusting your iris, especially on some high school fields where they get down towards the goal line and there aren't lights there. It's pretty bad lighting. But at midfield, it's super bright because there are 3 different sets of lights hitting them. So know that this is manual, and it's manual for a reason, and you're going to have to adjust it. Now, the reason auto is not being used, we are going manual on these cameras, and there's even that's another thing. If you are making adjustments and you're not really seeing changes happen, it could be that this little switch got bumped. It says auto or manual. It could have gotten bumped to auto. You want it on manual. And I'll show you guys some examples here in just a second. But the reason for that is auto's great when you're dealing with pretty stationary objects and settings that won't necessarily change. I go pretty much exclusively manual for that reason, because you'll see certain plays where, again, like I said, at the 50-yard line or at one end of the basketball court, the lighting's a little bit different, so the colors are going to be a little bit different. So you may see someone wearing a white uniform and it's a little tinge of blue, and then as it comes down, all of a sudden it flips to a tinge of orange. That's a really bad look. It does not look good. It just frankly looks like you're leaning on the auto, and it's you're not getting the highest quality that you can. The other thing is with autofocus, it can be great. You can even hit autofocus for a second to get an idea of how you compare to how you're manually set up. But then before the play, flip it, because let's say I shoot a lot of high school football. You have this great play of the quarterback rolling out and throwing a touchdown, but the ref steps in front of your camera. All of a sudden, the computer in the camera is thinking, oh, this is the main subject now, we need to adjust. So then all of a sudden it will adjust to that. You're missing this great play because the referee stepped in front of you, and let's face it, the referee's going to step in front of you a lot because they're moving around a lot. So that's another thing. And then another thing I've noticed in basketball, in football, a three-pointer where you're tracking the ball and it goes into the lights. All of a sudden, again, the computer in the camera is tracking the ball, and all of a sudden it's a very bright background because of the lights. So it will go dark and then heat up again. And that's the same thing with like a deep pass in football, I've noticed. And you're kind of giving your viewers whiplash. So if you want it set, you want it to be consistent throughout. And I'll show you a couple of examples here to kind of show the bad examples, because we've had a couple over the years. But that's why we don't do auto. Auto is just, you'll have to make adjustments mid-play. There are going to be times that you'll have to adjust your focus, and something will be out of focus for a quick second, but you can fix it. But that looks natural to people. But when it's a computer doing it, when it's auto, it's always going to be, whether it's color, whether it's iris, whether it's focus, it's always going to be a step behind because the computer needs to process it. So you doing it manually is a lot quicker, a lot better quality, and overall it's gonna be a much better product. And us professors, we can see pretty quickly when it's manual and when it's auto. So those are just a couple of other things. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. But I think between the Jet Lab, between some of the documents we'll be giving you, and then this tutorial as well, I think you guys are going to be in a pretty good spot on cameras. But it's all about reps as well. So if you are able to get your hands on a camera, also awesome. Make sure that you're utilizing that time properly. If you're in a situation where you aren't able to get your hands on a camera right away, that's okay. We will get you caught up, whether that's later in the semester, whether that's before next semester, whatever it may be. I don't want you guys to feel like you're going to get behind. We're giving you all of these resources so you can replay them again and again, and you can learn with it and that sort of thing. So wherever you're at, whatever your situation is, know that we will get you set up how you need to be set up and get you those reps whenever it may come. I know every situation is going to be a little bit different, but know that we will make it possible for all of you guys to make sure you're getting that experience and you're getting this knowledge with these cameras, not only for this semester, but for future semesters. So again, as always, let me know if you have any questions.